What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Trophy Garden. And today we got a lot of topics to go over. And Scarlet and Violet, they drop in about a week, and it should be very exciting. How is everyone doing today?
Doing well, yeah. Thanks for leading us in, James. I'm Wolfglick. That was James Beck, and we're also joined by Aaron Zeng here on Trophy Garden. Three competitive Pokemon players with a pretty sizable a slew of results over the years. But yeah, I mean, I think the big topic on everyone's mind is Scarlet and Violet, which, as James says, releases in I think exactly a week from today, from when we're recording this. Aaron, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about the new game release?
I'm definitely pumped. I think it's interesting. I feel like for me, the last few generations, I've been so competitively focused that I kind of get the game and rush through the in game just to start getting Pokemon, for teams and whatnot. But given that this is a kind of new formula for the games, I'm excited to just see what the in game experience is like. I think that'll be really fun. And overall, it's wild, I think especially as competitive players, every 3 years, it's completely new Pokemon, completely new mechanics. We're all learning so much right from the start. So I'm definitely nervous in many ways, but also eager to just, get things started. And I think the first few months are going to be super chaotic, but in a really fun way.
I feel like the time at the very beginning of a generation is so special because nobody has any idea what's going on. You know what I mean? Like everyone, no matter whether you're veterans, like all of us have been playing for, between 8 and 10 plus years, 11, 12 years. And even for us, like there's so much to learn. All the new Pokemon, all the new moves, items, abilities, they often change things from previous generations, like mechanics core to the game from year to year or from generation to generation. So for me, I don't know, the early metagame of a new generation is always just so exciting and so fun and so chaotic. And unlike it's different than just starting a new format. You know what I mean? Like it only comes once every 3 years, and it only lasts for I feel like the first 3 months are when everyone's like really trying to figure things out. So yeah, I don't know. I think this period is so fun, but I think I cut you off, James.
It's also, no, I didn't really have much to add, but I think it's really interesting as well when you have like all these Pokemon coming back, and then you have to learn all the new Pokemon, and then even the Pokemon that are coming back, like between generations, there's moveset changes, there's some changes to stats sometimes, abilities. I think it's just really cool to see some Pokemon like get buffed in a way to where they're actually competitively viable or even better than they were before, and then some of the Pokemon that might have been strong in the past might not feel as great because they were changed slightly. So it's pretty interesting just to adapt from previous knowledge and learn new mechanics as we like go into this generation.
Yeah, and that's not even to mention new Pokemon evolutions, right? Like we know Girafarig is getting an evolution for Farigiraf, and like it's interesting. I always think new evolutions, especially when they're good, are interesting because like so much, a Pokemon like Girafarig, right? Like none of us have probably used that seriously, maybe ever in our combined 30 years playing this game, and all of a sudden, who knows? Like maybe Farigiraf could be like super strong. So I think that's also really interesting, where it's like, oh, we have some knowledge of how this Pokemon might work based on what we know about like the pre-evolution, but like we don't have any experience with it. So I think that's another. I love when they add evolutions for old Pokemon personally.
Yeah, or new forms. We have like some new forms, and should be pretty exciting to see how they'll actually be relative in competitive play. Like I loved the idea since they introduced forms. I think there were a lot of, like, for instance, Alolan Persian. Like, did you ever think we were going to use Persian competitive in the past? I didn't think so.
Absolutely not. That mon is not good. But Alolan Persian was actually pretty good. Yeah, that's a great call out.
Yeah, Marowak. Both Marowak forms have made the top cut at the World Championship, which is absolutely insane. I just really think that these regional forms are awesome. Like, they add so much, I think.
100%. I agree.
I also think for me, like, it's always really hard to like theory craft with new mechanics until like the game is actually out. So it's like we've obviously known about the new mechanic for a while now, but there's only so much that you can do without knowing all the new Pokemon and whatever buffs and nerfs Pokemon have and all the new moves. And so I'm just excited to like get the game in hand and finally start getting some like on hand experience with it. I think it's it's such an interesting and unique mechanic. I'm hoping it doesn't end up being, too crazy like some of the other mechanics that we've had. But I think that's where a lot of the excitement stems from as well. It's like, okay, we've seen all these previews, we can think about it as much as we want, but I'm excited to like finally actually dive into things and just be able to, play the game and get some hands-on experience with it.
Yeah, it's like almost impossible to theory like the mechanic until you actually have all the details. Like, for example, we don't know, like, there's a lot of things that officially aren't confirmed yet, like what happens when you switch out of your terrestrial Pokemon, but also like more niche things, right? Like, let's say I have a physical attacker with Tera Fire and it gets burned with Will-O-Wisp before it terrestrializes. Like, I don't know what happens if, that Pokemon terrestrializes. Like, does it remain burned even though fire types are immune? You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of these kind of edge cases. A fun little anecdote is I remember, it was, where was it? I was talking to Marcus. He was staying with me this is like 2014, or maybe it was Worlds 2013, and we were talking about Mega Evolution, and we thought, like, we didn't know that you couldn't like trick like or switcheroo the Mega Stones. We were talking about like Garchomp, and like maybe you run like Choice Band or Choice Scarf Garchomp with like a trick partner with Garchomp Bite, and then you like choose whether you want to like Mega Evolve it like with trick, and like you could also like give the Mega Stone to the opponent and have it be worthless. But yeah, you can't actually trick Mega Stone, so that turns out that conversation was not a good use of our time. And there's going to be stuff like that with terrestrialization, where if you make one wrong assumption about how the mechanic works, like all of your theory following it will be wrong.
Yeah, I remember that with Dynamax and how phasing was going to be really important until you realized, oh, the only way you could phase is like through a trick, eject button method. While you can't use like Roar, Dragon Tail, or any of those kind of moves to stop Dynamax. And yeah, that probably was a big waste of time, but it's exciting to theory craft and then actually test in the game. I think both are pretty fun.
I agree. Okay, cool. So we're all feeling good for Scarlet and Violet then. I want to talk about one specific part of Scarlet and Violet, which is the part that we probably all care the most about, which is competitive Pokemon, and specifically, there's a regional not too long after release. It's in San Diego, and it's in, I want to say, January 6th. It's whatever that weekend is around there.
Yep, January 6th to January 8th, I believe.
Thank you. So first question, are you guys planning on attending?
I did register as a player, so I think that'll be exciting. Yeah, I think the first regionals of Sword and Shield in Dallas was a crazy experience. I wish I did a little better. I started 5-1 and then really fell off. I think I went 1-3 in the last 4 games, and I think I would have cut as a 7-3, so that was like incredibly demoralizing. But it was crazy. It was like the first 10-round Pokemon tournament I've ever taken part of, like 10 rounds in one day, specifically, and I think there's over 550 registrations for VGC alone already. And this is like in less than 24 hours, really less than 12 hours even. And there's just been, obviously so much hype around it. And I assume there'll be plenty of other people that'll sign up. Like if, assuming the registration doesn't fill up too quickly in the next few days or weeks. Hopefully like once the game is actually out, people will be like, oh, I'm down to go. But just seeing like so many people register already, I think is super, super awesome. And I mean, just going back to live events in general this last season was really refreshing. There are going to be so many new faces, as well as a lot of really old faces that we haven't seen in a long time,
I would say really old.
old relative to when they started playing the game.
Old in terms of how long they've been playing, perhaps, is what you mean.
Yes, not actual age, but I'm thinking of people who were maybe super good in 2014, 15, 16, even 13. Like, I've seen a lot of those players register for San Diego, so it's just gonna be great to see everyone, and of course, whoever does well at this first regionals, that's gonna be extra hype as well.
Yeah, this is gonna be the biggest regional in, I want to say, 10 years.
Depends if it
Dallas was bigger for now.
Yeah, Dallas had like 1,000, I want to say, if I'm not much mistaken. Maybe
I think it was like 600, 700-ish.
I thought Dallas was 500 something.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Dallas was 500 because I was talking about it with some friends last night. I'm pretty sure that this is almost on track to be bigger. I don't think it's bigger yet, but it's on track to be.
Yeah, it's been like 12 hours, so yeah. I mean, when I heard, the last I heard was 400, so that it's already over like 550 is pretty remarkable. But sorry, James, go on.
I think it's pretty interesting too. We talked about first regionals. In first regionals, you get like all these obviously new players, you get some players coming back, and then you got the current player base. And the meta, as we talked about, it's chaotic. I think the first regional, like, I think the most exciting one was like not a regional, but it's 2017 European Internationals, where it was what, like a week after the game came out,
it
or
was
something
ridiculous. It was like
3 weeks, I want to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say 2, so between 1 and 3 weeks, I think. And it was like, I mean, that is, that is not a lot of time to not only get the game, beat the game, but get a full competitive team. Like, that alone is difficult, but also figure out which Pokemon you even want to use in the first place. It was quite chaotic, to say the least. So, but yeah, go ahead, James. Sorry.
Yeah, you
keep
just
butting
in. Oh, good. But it's just so interesting, right? You have all these different ideas, and at the beginning of the game, we do have like about a month and a half, I guess, between the first regional and when the games come out. But I think it's going to be super interesting, where you're just going to have so many different ideas at that tournament. Where I don't know what can you really say. How are you going to make a call going into this regional? Because there's going to be so many teams. There's probably going to be stuff you've never even thought of or seen playing at this regional. So I think early meta is really interesting, and I don't think I've ever done well at an early meta event before.
Maybe not with that attitude. I think this one's going to be your one. I'm calling it now.
I do want to also, like, I hope that with Scarlet and Violet we see like improvements to the circuit, because I think, like, the trading card game has an interesting structure where it's, kind of split into day 1 and day 2, very much like how, the internationals and worlds are for VGC. We just have so many players now, and I think, like, Dallas, like a 10-round Swiss day 1 into a single limb top cut bracket was not very appealing, and I would much prefer, now that, we have so many players registered, for a similar structure where it's like, yeah, day 1, 9 rounds, anyone who wins 7 or more moves on to day 2, and then your records add up. Like, that feels a little bit better to me. Also, like, one thing I was curious on is, your guys' takes on, like, the entry fees. I think, like, net $70 now for regionals, and, for anyone listening, like, way back when VGC first started, events were literally free. And so, yeah, then they kind of got delegated to, individual tournament organizers, and the costs have, increased pretty steadily over the years. One of the reasons I actually kind of stepped away from playing, especially after like 2016, was because, like, I thought entry fees are obviously a part of it. Like, yeah, they're only going up $10, but then it was also like where the regionals maybe were located, and like just getting to all these different tournaments, and the cost when you add up like entry fee plus hotel plus airfare, like it can be a really expensive weekend. And so yeah, I hope that as we get charged more and more, like the experience at least improves.
I am big mad about entry fees, because yeah, like as you mentioned, for the first 5 years events were free, and then maybe even 6 that I was playing, it was longer for free because VGC existed before I started. And then they started with $20. It was like $20, and eventually they jumped up to $40, and then it feels like every year they go up $10 basically. And I think what's frustrating, as Aaron mentioned, is that we don't see where this additional cost is going, right? To me, we don't get any communication. I think I saw on the registration website, I'm not even sure that we get the normal like swag that we normally get. Like it seemed like on the website, I could be wrong about this. I'm gonna quickly try and look it up, but like basically like it's the cost continues to increase, and the experience doesn't get any better. And it's like, why are they charging so much more money when things like, when we don't see anything for it? Like, to me, it really feels like it's tough because we don't have any transparency, but it seems to me like the event organizers are like, oh, we can just charge people $10 more and like make more money, you know what I mean? And I have no idea if that's accurate, like, but it's tough because we don't get any communication. Like, there aren't organizers being like, this is why the cost is like has gone up, right? And it's like, okay, well, there's nothing we can do. It's like kind of a hostage situation, right? I mean, for guys like us, and honestly, like for players like us, we're probably gonna make back the money at some point anyway, so it's not as big of a deal. But the thing is that, like, it's really prohibitive to new players, and that's what really gets me upset about it. Is like, I'm not like, if it's $60, if it's $70, if it's $80, if it's $100, I'm still gonna play, right? And it's not gonna be that big a deal. But like, for a new player, that's a huge. I mean, they're charging more than the game costs, right? And I think that's really, I don't know. I can't really say. I can't really draw conclusions because, again, we don't know why they keep raising the price. But yeah, it sucks. It sucks because, like, they're still selling out events, so there's no incentive for them to change their behavior. But it doesn't feel good as somebody who cares very deeply about making the game more accessible and bringing more people in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely frustrating, especially yeah, events were all free when I think we all started. I remember I think what it was like 25 dollars for entry fees back in 2016, I think is
Mm-hmm.
when it started. And that's when they increased the prize pool. So it was actually like a pretty fair game. And like regionals for free were kind of insane realistically. Like, man, I don't think I would have really gotten into Pokemon really if it wasn't for like the game being free or, you know, maybe 10 or $25. I think that was completely fine. But 70 is pretty insane. And not to mention, it's not just for the Masters division, which is players 15 and up. It's for all divisions. And
Really?
yeah, it's for all divisions. Juniors and seniors are also $70. So if I was a
What?
junior or a senior having to pay $70 for a regional, imagine parents what they would think of it. And I think that's why our lower divisions have been, you know, basically non-existent with players. They have to usually combine juniors and seniors for like every single event basically to compete. And I think it's very frustrating for the juniors and seniors especially. And I think that's not only is it hurting masters, but it's also hurting the lower divisions. So I don't think it's very feasible in a way to where, you know, we're going to get new players because of this, you know, pay to enter where it's $70. But I can't really say. I mean, I'm very frustrated, of course. I feel like a lot of others are definitely frustrated, but I mean, yeah, again, we don't know where that money is. Back in the day, I think the Pokemon company itself like handled all the venues and stuff, but now it's like kind of outsourced to like the TOs to actually get the venues where, and you know, they have these requirements and stuff that they have to work with and then set up the entry fee. So it's just kind of frustrating that we don't have that information. But yeah, I mean, I do think $70. Even I felt like the highest entry fees for a regional ever should have been was $40. And
I
yeah,
agree.
pricing is different from, I guess, entry fee because TPCI or TPC distributes the pricing. It's not through the TO. The TO takes the entry fee and that's used for separate costs. But yeah, it's just without that information, we just can't really say. And it's just like, yeah, we can't really make a call on that.
I think
And,
it's
like,
worth noting that, like, oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, I get it from the tournament organizer's perspective, right? At the end of the day, it's a business, and you're trying to, you know, maximize revenue. But I think what's frustrating is the lack of transparency, like you guys said. And in all fairness, like, they don't owe us anything as tournament organizers, right? But I think the main thing is, especially for players that have been playing for so long, it's like, oh, we keep seeing prices increase. In many ways, I actually think like the experience has maybe decreased in value. Like, I actually, some of my favorite regionals were, you know, back in 2010, 2011, when it was like, you know, the VGC specific, and the circuit was completely different back then, but it was free to enter. Like, I literally would bring my friends from school to come and play, and I don't know, it was just a super cool experience. And then, you know, we combined the circuit with TCG in 2012, and the events then started becoming, you know, simultaneous. And yeah, it's just like, okay, prices have continued to increase. We don't really see any of the economics behind it. We're not really owed an answer here, but at the same time, like, I think it's fair to be frustrated as the player base, right? And similar to what you were saying, Wolf, like, it's really hard for me to convince, like, maybe friends who live locally to a tournament to, like, want to spend $70 casually to play in a weekend. Whereas, yeah, back when it was free, there were a lot of people that were, like, local to the area that I feel like I could bring and would show up and play. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that, like, what I was actually going to say is that, like, the only reason I was able to get into VGC in the first place is, like, because there was a local event within 30 minutes driving distance from my house, and they already had the game, right? Like, just getting my parents to, like, take me there, you know, like, it was, like, my you know, they did it, but it was like, that was the big ask, you know? I don't think I could have asked for, like, $70 on top of that to enter a tournament where, like, you know, like, I was almost certainly not going to see any return. Like, I was only able to play VGC my first 2 years because, like, I won regionals and nationals my first year, and then got second at regionals, first at nationals again. Mm-hmm. So it was paying for all my travel. So, like, that was the only reason I was able to, like, to even start VGC in the first place. And I wouldn't have had that ability if the entry fee had like been so prohibitive. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, yeah. And so yeah, to your point, Aaron, it's local players, it's players on the fence, it's players on the fringe who get pushed out. And it's like, I don't like the VGC as like a rich man's game. You know what I mean? Like, I it's already bad enough with like if you could be the best player in the world, and if you don't have like the time to go to like locals every weekend or travel to 3 to 4 internationals or go to regionals. Like there are players who are playing over half the weekends, if not more, of the year to like remain competitive, and like you just can't keep up with that already. And when you consider how high the entry fees are on top of that, it's just, I don't know, it's like it's very much like a pay to win system, and entry fees only like entry fees pushing out talented players who could maybe get in and start, and like like let's say you're a player who like has the skill to like potentially win a regional, or make you back your money at a regional. You might not even get the chance to enter if it's so expensive. And I guess the last thing I want to say about it is like, like yes, prizes have increased a lot, but like the money that gets put into the tournament like isn't going towards prizes. Like the prize money comes from TPC, so or TPCI, I don't know. But like like above a certain point, like whether we have what's top prize money, is it like 400 entrants?
No, it's 200.
It's 200?
201.
Okay.
201 plus is 3,000 for winner, and top 16 gets 250. I was actually complaining about this yesterday. But...
Okay, yeah. So like basically like, okay, if we have 201 entrants, or if we have 1,000 entrants, the prize money doesn't go the same, even though the TOs are making thousands more dollars.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't know how the logistics are brought, because I'd imagine, of course, renting out an entire venue, depending on the location, is going to be expensive regardless. Then you have to get staff. A lot of staff are volunteer, but usually some travel accommodations are. I don't know if that's paid by TPCI or TPC, but that's what's frustrating. We don't know that information.
Right. I mean, it's totally possible that like there is a real answer as to why the costs are increasing, but I think I don't know. It's also complicated, especially because the TOs are working with TPC. But it's like if this is just communicated, like we'd be like, okay, we get it, right? Like you have to increase costs because X, Y, Z. But because it's not communicated, it's like it feels like if there was a good answer for it, then it would be communicated. And yeah, like that's what feels bad.
It is definitely a frustrating experience, but yeah, I mean, I definitely would have well, we all would like some transparency on that, but I don't think we're gonna get it anytime soon.
No,
but
I don't think so.
Yeah, I at the end of the day, I don't know. I just keep thinking about like the opposing perspective, and it's like, okay, people keep continuing to pay the money even though there's a lot of complaints. Like we're still making more and more. Like we don't owe it to the community. I don't believe in that personally, right? Like I've always tried to be really transparent, but also it's different when you're a TO or a business owner. So yeah, just kind of looking at it from their perspective. But I think we've all been especially frustrated because we used to have the luxury of maybe free tournaments, and yeah, maybe we were just lucky to even have that as an experience in general.
Would y'all say, what would you improve at IRL tournaments besides obviously this prizing stuff that we talked about and entry fees? Is there anything else you would like to see improve at IRL tournaments? Because I feel like the only thing I've really seen is those maybe like few gaming setups where you have like stadium and stuff. But I don't know. I've never really done those games before. Is there anything you would actually like to see improve at IRL tournaments?
I think for me, one big thing at Worlds was like, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but like so the way that the venue worked at Worlds was like, normally there's kind of barriers between where the players are sitting and where like the spectators are allowed to watch, but at Worlds there wasn't. And so for my first round, I was on the very edge, and there were like guys looking over my shoulder, and they had their phone out and they were filming me from like over my shoulder. So they got like all my HP stats, all of my moves, like even the ones I didn't reveal. And yeah, it was like, I don't know, like I think maybe a little bit more divide between like the playing area and like the spectator area would be nice. Like that's kind of an extreme circumstance. I also know that like some players brought binoculars to day one, which like I think was partially a joke, but like I don't know for sure, right? Like it's in a game like Pokemon where the information advantage is so significant. It's like I feel like stuff like that is a really big disadvantage. So a little bit more, I don't know, divide would be nice in the future in terms of like barriers.
My apologies, Wolf. I was technically
were a binocular guy. Oh my god.
I wasn't actually day one, and I actually wasn't day one. It was I know some friends who did that for day one. I did one match for day two. It was just because the game was taking so long. I was like, where the hell are they doing?
Oh my god.
And
did it work? Like, could you see?
Yeah, I saw the Lunala Dynamax, and
Oh my god.
I only had those binoculars because I went to London Eye that day. So
Oh
they
my
gave me a free pair of binoculars, and I'm like,
Tourism
oh wait, I
pays.
still have them in my bag, so I'm gonna use them.
That's so funny. Oh my god, that's really, really funny.
It's actually funny because the guy was an opponent that I played later. Although,
Oh my god,
it didn't really matter because I got the info because he was already playing a friend of mine. But it was just funny that it happened that way.
Right, like it could have, it very easily could have made a difference, which is pretty wild. Now, yeah, okay, I see why you're top 4. All right, noted for next time.
Gotta get the
I
scouting.
think on that question from earlier, one thing that I think is really hard in VGC is if you're a newer player, like getting acclimated and finding people in the community. I think it's an amazing community, you know, and we've all met so many amazing people from it, but you know, I've talked to players who, you know, one who I actually met through school, for example, and he mentioned to me, yeah, he went to a couple regionals last year, and the experience was kind of fun, but at the end of the day, it was like, yeah, I showed up, you know, played a couple rounds, and it felt like everyone already had like friend groups or circles, and then for those that might be newer that don't have those friend groups or circles, it can be really hard to like, I don't know, find new people. And so I'd love to see events have more ways for, yeah, people who are maybe looking for friends or it's like their first tournament to get more acclimated within the community and feel like they can meet people naturally rather than like having to try super hard. I don't know what the answer for that is, truthfully, but it's just something I was considering because I think it can be really hard if you're a newer player to come in, not really know people, and maybe everyone's friendly to you, but at the end of the day, like you know, you don't have like a group of friends that you can go get meals with or whatnot after the event. And you know, obviously people can meet online before tournaments or whatnot, but yeah, I'd love to see more done in the in-person experience so that newer players can walk away feeling like they made like good friends or good acquaintances after the weekend.
I think that's a really good point, and something that, you know, I think is really mindful because, you know, that's not something that we personally have to think about since we've been playing for so long. I think side events are a good way to do it, right? Like, I know a lot of people, I mean, I'm sure that, but this is true for me, like, I'm sure for you guys as well, like, a lot of the ways in which, like, a lot of my friends from Pokemon I've made through, like, playing them, like, Justin Karras, for example, is one of my best friends. We, like, became friends playing at Worlds. Leonard Kraft, like, I really liked him as well after playing him, and, like, that's how we became friends and started talking. So, like, I think, like, maybe just more opportunities for people to play in a situation where like the stakes aren't high, right? Like, I mean, because if you're a new player and you're like, what should I do? Like, I have all this time. Like, side events are a pretty good option, right? I think for us, like, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I have never played a side event, I think, except for like the multi-battle ones back at like US Nationals. And maybe an occasional one. Was that?
You count the Worlds Opens?
No, I think that's like an event. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
Like basically a side event where there's like not really that much on the line. Maybe like, you know, that's another thing is I think side events should have better prizes. Like, you used to be able to actually win good stuff from them. But I think side events are like a better low stakes environment where you can like play and like you're forced to like talk to another person when you play them. So I think that's a good way to like break down some barriers and like, you know, if you're lucky, you'll high roll and meet some cool people.
I'm just curious. Do you talk to your opponents often, like while playing? I feel like at the beginning of a match and at the end of a match, sure, but during a match, yeah.
During a match, I think it's very rude, to be honest. Like, yeah.
I think it depends on the I'd say it depends on context. Like, yeah, if we're playing at Worlds, I'm trying to just be in the zone, but like I've played inside events where there's really nothing on the line, and
yeah,
so
that's true
like
too.
When like players engage in conversation there, like I'm totally willing to just talk because it's like, okay, yeah, I mean even like just smaller premier challenges that used to be tied to like regionals, you know, then I'd be a lot more. And it's not like I'm not willing to talk to people, but yeah, if you're trying to win regionals or worlds or whatever, you really want to be in the zone. And that's where I think side events are additive and great as well, right? Because it's a lot. I see a lot more conversation going on. And I think we do have side events at regionals, but to me, they always feel like I don't even know any information about them, right?
Yeah, me neither.
Who does? And so making it a grander experience, I think definitely would be cool. But yeah, I'm just thinking for all those players, like we want to ideally grow the player base, but also retain them, right? Because I think we often see so many people get really excited, go to a regional, and then they're like, okay, like this was fun, but you know, do I have the money to go to more, or did I like the experience to go to more? And ideally, like player retention, I feel like is valuable. If you can get people hooked onto the game and then get them to continue to play, that would be super awesome. But yeah, I think those are kind of my final thoughts on this area.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, agreed. One thing that I'm pretty interested in as we're starting the circuit back in January, we're going to have a bunch of regionals. I was actually wondering your thoughts on Sword and Shield, we didn't really have this problem because we did go into the pandemic, but we did do this in 2019 with series, and obviously in 2022 we actually ended up playing a pretty long format when we resumed the game. We had like 7 months, I think, for series 12, and I wanted to know your thoughts about series versus, you know, playing a year long or season long format.
Whew. It's a tough question. It's funny because I think it's a grass is always greener situation in terms of how the general player base feels. Where like at first people were like, yes, we love series, like year-long formats suck, and now we've been doing series and it feels like the general player base is like, we hate series, go back to year-long. I think they each have their pros and cons. I will say that I liked the way that Sword and Shield was doing it at first, like before the pandemic, like that kind of gradual progression where things were added in slowly, I felt was good. But I didn't like Sun Moon Ultra, the 2019 series idea, because like I don't know about you guys, but it just felt like Sun and Moon didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't the final format. Like it was such a drastic difference between the formats that like, you know, like it was like the skills that you built in Sun and Moon might not even be like applicable to Ultra, and like I just couldn't really find myself caring. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't like how World was.
Actually, theoretically, yeah, that's how it should have been. But
for you, yeah. Hold on,
I very much disagree because I don't know if the viewers know this, but I imagine some do, where I used the same 6 Pokemon to all 3 different series, and I cut the biggest tournament out of all of each series with the same 6, just slight adjustments. And I really think, ironically, a lot of that success came from the 1 month I dedicated to learning that team in Sun and Moon, or yeah, the Sun series. So yeah, like I didn't really play it in Moon series. I only picked it up for Oceania, which was the Moon series international event, just because I couldn't figure out a team to actually compete in, and a lot of the experience I felt like I still had in Sun. And then when I picked it up for Ultra series, like late NIC period, it actually just felt the same. Like I was surprised too. Like I thought, oh, this is not gonna work. There's so many different variables, and then it ended up working, which found, by the way, super surprising.
What James isn't mentioning here is that it's like the series are pretty drastic, so it's already a pretty ridiculous thing to be doing in the first place. But he didn't have a Mega Evolution because Mega Evolutions weren't allowed in the Sun series. So like Mega Evolution, obviously like a pretty impactful mechanic. James didn't even have one. Like your team was what? Tornadus Kyogre, Kartana Xerneas, Incineroar, and Among Us.
Yep.
Yeah. So none of those Pokemon can Mega Evolve. So it was like it was an impressive feat on its own, and to do it without a Mega Evolution, which my guess is you were the only player at Worlds without a Mega Evolution, is just kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's funny because the same team made top 8, but it was Kangaskhan over Kartana, and there were a few players who brought like Metagross or Kangaskhan over Kartana. But it's actually funny because I thought Kartana was way better than any of the Megas that could be provided on that team, just because I felt like it helped with way more matchups than any of the Megas could provide. Because I thought most of the Megas actually on certain teams just were kind of like another Pokemon. It didn't feel like they were an absolute necessity. Like, especially with all the nerfs that happened with like Salamence, Aerialate, Kangaskhan, of course. It just didn't feel like there was really that much of a power difference. So that's how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, well, it clearly paid off. You got top 4, so like I think that's like proving your theory. I will say that though, I think that team was kind of a special case. I don't think that most Sun teams could have been usable in Ultra, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I feel like the Lunala Xerneas stuff, I think that could have gotten away without a Mega, and we did see probably variants of that, but yeah, I think it's just really interesting with series and a long format. I always thought series weren't great unless they were gradual, and even I didn't really, I guess because one of the things, we didn't have this tournament experience, but in series 3, I believe, of Sword and Shield, when we got the home stuff, when we got Incineroar and Venusaur, I think it started going super downhill for my enjoyment there. Like, I thought series 1 to series 2 transition was fine. There was like, that was just a weird period where they didn't allow solar powered Charizard, even though it was technically legal. That was just really interesting. But yeah, overall, I don't really like series too much, but I feel like, do you think we're going to have in Scarlet Violet is the case? Because we have Pokemon Home, I think, coming out in March confirmed. And I don't know if y'all have been keeping up with some of the stuff, but there are some pretty big threats coming into home updates. So
I have not been keeping up with it. I also would expect them to continue the series personally. As for my opinion, like, I actually really like it as a content creator, but not, I don't know, as a player, like,
yeah, I feel that.
I'm kind of mixed, but I guess I also, like, didn't really play. I mean, I played a little bit throughout this last season, but it was mixed between playing and commentating, and you know, the season was also way shorter, right? Like, we kicked off in-person events back in March, and so it was like a 6-month season rather than, you know, 9 months or longer. So I'm kind of torn. Like, I just don't have. Yeah, I guess 2019 I didn't really play at all. But I can see why. Like Wolf, you mentioned, you know, you weren't like the biggest fan. It kind of just felt pointless earlier on. So yeah, I guess I could go either way. I like the progression Sword and Shield, but I guess what I didn't like is like when it became a restricted format personally. Like I'm wondering if maybe my opinions on this would change if we just like weren't playing restricted formats, right? But to be honest, I don't really remember the earlier series in Sword and Shield. Like, I couldn't tell you the difference between like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like, they're all kind of just numbers to me at this point. But I do remember while playing through it or making content for it, I enjoyed it. And so, yeah, we'll see. I think for this one, I don't feel super strongly one way or the other.
That makes sense. I will say that, like, the thing about whoa, can't talk. The thing for me is that I think that series made sense naturally in Sword and Shield specifically in the early stages because Gigantamax Pokemon were being rolled out, so it was like they were adding bonus content to the game that weren't like legal up to that point. So it made sense because a lot of the early series were adding Gigantamax Pokemon. So I'm curious to see what they do, whether it's like a longer series thing, because like for Scarlet and Violet, you know, the first couple months, like if there's no kind of content similar to what they were doing with Gigantamax Pokemon, like the Pokemon in the game are the Pokemon in the game until Pokemon Home comes out, you know? So I don't know how much variety they can do except to restrict the pool more, which is normally it feels like they like to add more and more Pokemon to the pool. So maybe it'll be longer series, maybe it'll be like another, you know, set of 3 series, but I wouldn't mind, especially for a regional Dex, I wouldn't mind a year-long format, I think, for this one, or I guess it's, you know, technically only like 9 months. But yeah, I would be very down for a regional Dex format this time around.
I'm actually pretty curious if they're going to like roll out like specific Tera types for certain mons, and that's how they would do it, because I think that could be a possibility. I think, like, for instance, we're getting like on the release month, it's like a dragon version of Charmander. Yeah, and I guess like Charmander is not technically you can catch otherwise, but they could probably do it. Then we all have DLC, but maybe like I'd imagine we have DLC. There's a lot of facts pointing to it, but also like the fact that Japan video game industry itself like is a big fan of like making DLC, and I just can't see why they wouldn't do it for Scarlet and Violet. It's such a big opportunity, so I imagine we have DLC. I'm kind of curious if that would be like the next season, I guess, like the 2024 circuit, but I don't know. I think it's pretty interesting. I think series as well. Like the problem I had with series is like you mentioned how you didn't like in 19, like that they were pretty different from each other. For me, Sword and Shields, like we would have been playing Worlds, I think, in series 5 or 6. And series 5 and series 6 were completely different from series 1, and I felt like the progressions was like really different back then. So
I will say I think that it was really different because of Incineroar specifically. Like I think it was almost entirely Incineroar and Venusaur's fault that it was so different, right? They added
those 2 Pokemon.
Yeah. I had something else to say, but I've forgotten. So you guys can step in while I try to remember.
I think one, you know, we've been talking a lot about like the future and, you know, Scarlet and Violet and what we're excited for, but obviously we are nearing the end of a 3-year journey with Sword and Shield, and so I think it really has been a life-changing game for us in many ways, and I'm curious, you know, for you guys, what was either, you know, your favorite or your best moment just from the 3 years of Sword and Shield. I think it's really hard to pick one, so I'm happy for everyone to list a couple. I think for me, I mean, first of all, it was just such a new, like competitively, it like blew the game wide open, or blew the franchise open, right? We had like QR codes for rentals back in Sun and Moon, but having like rental codes where you could just type in something rather than literally having to take your 3DS and scan it on the global link website, like I think decreasing the barrier to entry was awesome. And so from a content perspective, like yeah, I just had so much fun making like battle videos, and I always had fun making them, but it like just having so many more teams widely accessible, I think was absolutely amazing. And then some of my favorite moments like within tournaments was either like top cutting Salt Lake regionals with what I thought was like a fairly unique team, and then getting to like be an analyst at Worlds in a the first time that position had ever really existed. So those were kind of my highlights. But yeah, I was just like, it felt like the competitive was so much bigger than I expected to be in Sword and Shield, and it's unfortunate we had like 2 years of it kind of shut down because of COVID. But in the end, like there were still so many good moments from it.
Yeah, very well said. I think that competitive turned a corner in Gen 8, and I think rental codes was a big part of that. I think for me, winning the Players Cup 2 on my birthday was like definitely a highlight. That was a really, really special moment. Especially like the way that it happened, where I had to beat the player who put me in the losers bracket, like in grand finals, like from losers, and to win 4 consecutive games. And like, I think that's some of the best Pokemon I ever played. Like I felt like for 2 of the games in particular, I perfectly like understood how he would play and how he would adapt. And like, yeah, I felt so good about the set that I played. And yeah, I remember like it was really nice because the way that the Players Cup worked was like it was recorded first, and then like they like did all the commentary and stuff, and then it was broadcasted like I think it was 2 weeks later. And so normally when you're playing in a tournament, you obviously can't also watch the chat at the same time. So it was a really special memory for me, like watching those games and like reading the chat and like being in the audience as well as being on the screen. But yeah, I think for me the other things that I'll mention, I'm really proud of the Worlds video that I just put out last week. Like I spent an enormous amount of time on it, and it was really challenging to make in a number of ways because like nobody had made any kind of content like this before, so I had no where to look for like how to like figuring it out. And the format was like the least appealing to casual viewers, and I did like my worst at Worlds ever, and it was like I wasn't even on stream, so we had no footage, we had no result, we had no like performance, and then we had no inspiration. And so the video is currently like it's the best performing video on my channel ever relative to how long it's been out. It's even outperforming the collab I did with Jaden, which is unthinkable because I thought it was gonna bomb, to be honest. So like working so hard on that and having it perform so well, it felt like a really good way to end Sword and Shield. It's my last video about Sword and Shield. The rest of them will be about Scarlet and Violet. Yeah, so I think that was really special. And like Sword and Shield really changed my life. Like I was at like 60,000 subscribers, uploading once a week beforehand, and now this is like my full-time job. So yeah, I'm very grateful to the games. It's been very like they really changed my life, and it's really interesting looking back to where I was, this time 3 years ago getting ready for Sword and Shield release versus where I am now,
Absolutely. That was a great video too. I watched it and I really loved the perspective, and you could really tell like how passionate you were about the game, and like the entire video I could feel it. So I really did enjoy watching that video. Wolf,
thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, my time. I guess content wise, I don't know. Sword and Shield was so weird. In Sun and Moon, I was like the first creator doing Sword and no, not Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon VGC content, and that was pretty exciting. And then when it came to Sword and Shield, I kind of was like really late into the game. I was at LIC when the games came out. I had like midterms and finals after coming back, so I didn't really get much started, and I felt like pretty slow. And then I really did enjoy, at least when the DLCs came out, I felt like I got better at making videos, and I feel like I can make some really great videos going to Scarlet Violet, so I'm very excited for that on that side, because I did grow quite a bit, but I feel like there's so much I could have done. I wish I knew all this, but I think that's the fun of the journey, But I think for competing wise, I don't know. I actually really did enjoy playing Sword and Shield as much, except Worlds. I thought Worlds was fantastic, mainly just because I felt like I was playing at my best. I felt like I finally like understood the game. I felt like I understood the team that I was playing. I was playing great throughout the tournament. I was facing really strong players and being able to make great calls all around. And I also had some of my worst times where I remember playing in New Jersey regionals, and that was like the first regionals I ever dropped in like 5 years or something. Like I dropped in the middle of it and then was spectating. I thought, man, this doesn't feel great at all. But then I was rooting for my friends in Top Cut, and that was like pretty exciting. Rooting in Worlds Finals, like those were some pretty great memories. So those probably rooting for my friends doing well, and then also just like playing at Worlds were probably my favorite Sword and Shield memories.
Those are very solid. Cool. Well, I think we're just about out of time here. Anyone have any final thoughts they want to share before we wrap up?
I'm just saying, it's already been such a fun journey. I'm glad we get to do this together. Yeah, I think like, Wolf and I worked on a lot of content, especially throughout Sword and Shield, and being able to work with James now as well is just super awesome. And I think, yeah, it's going to be a new era of Pokemon. Obviously, we don't know exactly what's in store for us, but I think that we've all learned, we've all grown a lot. We're eager to continue making fun content for everyone. I'm speaking for everyone here, but I do think that, it holds true for everyone. I'm excited to just keep doing cool stuff together. I think if you told us years ago when we first started playing that we'd be here, like a decade later, I would have been like, there's no way. And I'm eager to see how we can all balance, competing, commentating, playing, making content, all of that all together. And yeah, just continue to do cool stuff in the space.
Well said. Yeah, I personally am really excited to see like the next couple months. I think are going to be really impactful for all of us, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing where things are like, this time 3 months from now.
It should be a fun experience, and I don't know. I think especially content-wise, it'll be very exciting. But I'm pretty excited for the games itself. Hopefully, they will be great and just a fun game in general, but also like competing wise, I hope it's a great experience, because we all want a great competitive game that will probably last for a while, so should be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool. Well, that's all from us. Thank you for listening to Trophy Garden. Leave any comments, thoughts, questions, concerns in the comments below, and yeah, next time you see us, it'll be in Scarlet and Violet. Thank you for listening.